I just finished recording this exact video only to find that my mic was not capturing any audio. So let's do it again. Make it a shorter video than usual. So I ranked the 6 social studies style tests or certifications, the 6 main ones that I could find that I think would be of use for people to have, and especially for children. So we're looking at the lowest levels only. So at the highest levels, all of these tests are ridiculously tough, I'd say. But for now, we're looking at only the very lowest levels to see if a younger children in the early elementary grades, like grade 1, 2, 3, could pass them or not. Like, what is the difficulty? And we have the hardest one at the top and the easiest one at the bottom. And I'll explain why and how I rank them here. So I base them on a few different things here. One is if they have the readings for the kanji or not. So whether or not younger kids can even read the questions, which is important. If it's in person only or online as well, or um, and usually online as well means both are available. So I would say being able to take it online, usually this would give you the option of, being in a more comfortable environment to do the test, which in most cases makes it easier, especially for like multiple choice questions. And the perceived difficulty from when I took all the practice tests that you can see in other videos, and you can probably tell from some of those videos, some of these tests I don't even think I could pass, even if I studied a little bit, right? I think I'd have to study pretty hard to pass some of them. And how many times you can take this test a year? Of course, each time you take the test, it would cost money, but let's say just for the sake of conversation that you had unlimited funds for these tests, it's easier to pass a test you can take 4 times a year than one you get like 1 time a year chance. And then the passing rate, the number of questions on the test, and the time per question, basically. So, of course, this does depend a lot on, the length of each question and various other things. But in general, overall, if you have like more than a minute per question, if you have just 1 minute per question, I say it's rough, kind of difficult. If you have more than a minute per question, like this one at the top, we have 2 minutes, more than 2 minutes per question. It gives you a little bit of leeway with your time. And then if your passing rate 60%, this is for most certifications considered like the lowest. There's very few certifications lower than 60% that you need to pass. A lot of the time it's 80%. Once in a while it's 90%, but 70% I say is more common, 70 to 80. But here in social studies, half of these are 60%, which makes it easier. And again, this is at the lowest level. Once you get to the highest level, all of these things could change. Online tests could go away. They could have no readings. The difficulty goes way up. Sometimes the highest difficulty, you have less chances to take it per year. Uh, and the time or amount of questions, the passing rate, whether or not you have multiple choice at all of that changes at the highest levels. So again, this is the lowest levels only. Okay, so let's take a look now. So the maps test, we're going most difficult first. The lowest level for this, and there's only like 2 major levels, and then within each of these levels, you get like rankings basically. But for the maps test, the lowest level, they pretty much have no readings for any of the kanji. It's in person only. The knowledge that you need to pass these is, I would say, extremely difficult. You need to know about reading maps. You need to know like some historical things. You need to know, uh, pop culture even. You need to know, I think, world geography to some extent. You just and being able to read like very specific symbols only used in Japan, some of them. The things that you need to know. This is one of the ones that you know I don't think I could pass without actually taking a lot of time to focus on it. So having a child passing that would be much more difficult. Again, this is just on average. and ranking these. So some kids might be really invested and interested in this sort of thing, and that's a different story. But on average, it's extremely difficult. They have it 2 times a year. That's still pretty tough, I'd say. The only easy thing about this is you have more than 2 minutes per question. You only need 60% to pass, but even though it's multiple choice and all the lowest levels are multiple choice, again, once you get to the highest levels of these, there's a lot of written questions. Um, you can have up to 6 multiple choice questions. So it's just like guessing. If you have no idea and you guess, your chances of getting that right are lower than most of these others. So that is the only difficult part of this end section here. Next, we have the World Heritage test. And honestly, I would say World Heritage News and History, all of these could be equally interchanged. And, you could still you could still uh, say the difficulty is roughly similar for the next three. I just ranked them based on the things that we go over here and how my perceived difficulty, for example. So World Heritage, it has some readings for the kanji, not all of them. Um, you should probably know most of the kanji that you go over in elementary school to be safe in this case, which I'd say is pretty tough. Um, and I think they do have all the difficult kanji and all the weird words and everything. It is in person only. The things that you need to know are very difficult. Even at the lowest level, you need to know, I think, the 26 or so World Heritage in Japan, as well as a lot of the famous world ones. Maybe some geographical information and and various things about these world heritages. So they also actually expect you to be able to read a little bit of English too, which is, I mean, the level of English is really low, but for a child in Japan, in the lower grades where they might not study English at all at first, anyway, uh, even that can be really difficult, I think. The good part about this is they have the test 4 times a year, so you have a lot of chances to take it, and you only need 60% to pass. So it's a low passing percent required. The general, most of these tests, 4 choices or 4 selections for the multiple choice, not too bad. But you only have 1 minute per question, so this is a little bit tough. Some of the questions can get kind of long too, and there's 50 questions, so you know you might get tired during the test with these mini questions. So that's pretty tough. Next, I have the news test here. So the news test is, I would say, the readings. They had most of the readings for the news test, so that is good. You don't need to um, have like passed a lot of the kanji tests or be able to read them, but you do need a lot of vocabulary either way. It is in person only, and I found that the questions were fairly difficult, as in, um, when I'm ranking these difficulties for the questions, this means that how much I think you would need to study to understand the material, or how likely it is that you would come across this material without having already studied. So I'd say it's difficult, but I didn't think it was as difficult as the world history in terms of the likeliness of having this kind of knowledge or being able to easily obtain it. You only get 2 chances a year though, which is probably average. A lot of these tests are 2 or 3, I would say, is most common. Um, for the social studies related one, it looks like 2 or 4 times a year is most common though. So you have 1 minute per question, 40 questions, kind of rough. 70% passing rate, higher than the previous two that we talked about, and 4 choices per question. So the last part here, the passing rate is a little bit more difficult than the World Heritage, um, but I felt that the World Heritage questions and their readings were more difficult, which is why I ranked it higher than the news test. For the history test, I put some readings, as in, I would say if you maybe have a level, elementary grade 3 knowledge of kanji, you are probably more than fine. Um, and the readings for the weird names or things that you learn in history are all written there. Um, but there are a lot of weird words, so the vocabulary, it's, I'd say, kind of tough. and you might not come across a lot of this stuff until you have taken it in school or studied it specifically. So that's why the difficulty is difficult. Um, Honestly, really, news or history, these two are very easily interchangeable with which one is more difficult. You can take the history one online now, which I think makes it easier. If I'm pretty sure this one requires the child to actually do the computer, um, everything on the computer themselves, and that might be proctored, so you're sort of recorded and everything. But you can take it online or in person, so you have that choice. It's only one time a year, so that is the most difficult part. In terms of, if you mess up, you have to wait a whole year. You do have more than a minute per question, so 50 minutes for 40 questions. You only need 60% to pass, and you only have three choices per question. And these are some of the main reasons. All of these are, you know, very low benchmark. Some of the questions can get a little bit long, which is tough, but again, only three choices and only 60% is necessary. You have more than a minute per question. So that's why I put history below both World Heritage and news. The next two, international flag test and disaster prevention, these can as well be interchangeable. Um, and I'll explain why in a moment here. Both of them have readings for everything, uh, but this is the biggest difference here. The international flags test you can actually take with your parent or guardian or a family member. Can be like a older sibling or a grandparent or whatever, or I think even like an uncle, aunt, or whatever. But you can take it with a parent, and they have all the readings for both. But the reason why, okay, so the easy part of this is, let's say your parent knows all the stuff. When you're taking it with the parent can actually, you can talk to the parent, and the parent can actually write in the answer for the child. I don't do this for my son. I have him write in the things, even if we have to talk about the answers. But the parent is allowed to write in the answers. So you could take a 2-year-old who can't even write anything, and you know, could potentially pass these tests because you can pass them with the parent. But this does require that the parent have knowledge of flags. So, if the parent does not know, let's say, like at least 150 country flags fairly well, then you probably won't pass, even if you have your parent there with you. The flag one's in person only, whereas the disaster prevention can be done online. I don't know offhand if disaster prevention is proctored or not. I actually think at the lowest level it might not be, because it's the lowest level is actually for kids as well. Um, the difficulty, both of these, I say somewhat difficult, is in the things you need to know. I actually think the flags test is more difficult than the disaster prevention. So I should have probably put easy for disaster prevention. So international flags is the likeliness that you come across this knowledge or have it ahead of time. The flag knowledge is something that you need to study for more likely than the disaster prevention. So I think the flag knowledge is fairly easy. For again, this is for the lowest level I'm talking about. For the lowest level for the flag test, most of the questions, not all of them, but most of them are, okay, here is a flag. What country is that? And then they give you 4 selections. Or this is the country name. What flag is this country for? One of those two, and 4 selections. So they do have a few tough questions, like the history of the flag or the meaning of the color, or something like that. But again, at the lowest level, once you get to level 3 and above, you start getting written questions. But at the lowest level, it is um, all multiple choice and fairly easy questions. So as long as you study for the flags, you know all the flags, you can pass for sure. You might not get 100%, but you can pass. It happens 4 times a year, which is quite easy. And there are 40 questions for 40 minutes. At the highest level, the level 1, there's 100 questions and your time doesn't go up. This is more than 2 questions a minute, and half of them are written questions. So that's really tough, I'd say. And the passing rate also, you need, I think, 80%. to pass at the highest level with 100 questions in 40 minutes. So that's pretty crazy. For at the lowest level, you only need 70%, which is, kind of average. And you have 4 choices. Whereas the disaster prevention, again, difficulty I put somewhat, but it's easier, I would say, much easier than the flags in terms of if you're likely to come across this knowledge beforehand or not, and what you need to study for. It only occurs 2 times a year, and you have more than 2 minutes per question, and there's only 15 questions. So you still need 70% to pass and have 4 choices, but more than 2 minutes per question, and the difficulty of the questions being so low, even if you can't take it with your parent, I would say that disaster prevention is a much easier one to get. So honestly, I am considering having my son doing the lowest level disaster prevention test, just because the difficulty of the actual questions doesn't seem so high. However, they also give you sort of like and there's a few ways to do this, is my understanding. But if a young kid is taking it, they also give you like an extra sort of work that you have to do outside of the test, and then you have to hand that in at a later date. So this is kind of like a extra layer of difficulty, which I think is why I put somewhat as opposed to super easy. If it was just the questions on the test, it would be really easy. But so that's why I ranked the international flags above disaster prevention. Because if you're taking the international flags with a parent, and the parent's just like, okay, I'll do this test entirely for you, and I'm super well knowledgeable with this stuff, then the international flag test would be the very easiest. But if the international flag test, if you're taking this and the parent's like either not well versed in flags, or wants you to write all the questions on your own, or all the answers on your own, or whatever, then it obviously is going to be much more difficult in that case. So hardest maps test, next world heritage, then news and history, then international flags, then disaster prevention. And my son and I have taken international flags test, already got up to the level 2, which is quite difficult. We might take the level 1 just because we're almost there. I don't know if we'll pass if we take it. We'd have to study for that for sure. So it really depends on how much summer homework we can get, and we have a lot of summer homework. The disaster prevention test, I think we might actually take later this year as well, just because I looked at it and it looks like something that we could already do. And when I say we, I mean he, not me, because the international flags you can take with your parent, but not the disaster prevention one. So disaster prevention was probably the easiest. If you haven't taken any of these, international flags would be next if you haven't taken any of these. And then history, news, and world heritage could be interchangeable, but I felt that history, with 3 choices, 60% passing to pass, and more time than questions, was slightly easier than the other two. The news, they give you the readings for most of the time, and you have only 40 questions as opposed to world heritage 50 questions, which I thought was a little bit less of a, if kids have too many questions, they just will stop partway through. They won't even go finish it. So these are my main reasons. Even though world heritage less passing percent, or less percent to pass required, I ordered them as news was slightly less difficulty, mostly based off the type of questions that you get. And then the maps test, I don't think you should probably attempt this unless you, for the lower grades kids, I mean, unless your kid really likes like reading maps, symbols, directions, and all this stuff. So the level of knowledge required to actually attempt this test is quite high, and I just think that yeah, unless you're already really into maps, this is not the one for most people to do. So for us, disaster prevention, and I might look at us taking history as well. News, I'll probably wait till next year, and World Heritage also, I'd probably wait till next year, but we'll see. So these two at the bottom, we might end up taking. That's just my ranking of the lowest levels only social studies test difficulty rankings. So remember, like, subscribe, and level up.